Good morning, guys. For those of you that don't already know, my name is Raymond Venuya, and today I'm going to be talking to you guys about why I think every photographer should try shooting film at least some point in their photo career. Now, I do want to start by saying you don't have to shoot film to be a good photographer. I do feel that there are a lot of great and amazing creators and photographers whose main gig is creating compositions in Photoshop and Lightroom. And while I'm pretty sure you could do those things, shooting film and using film scans, I just think it is a little bit more viable to do those things using all digital files. Whereas on the flip side, I don't think that shooting film makes you a good photographer. I do feel like a lot of photographers fall into the trap of, oh, well, it was shot on film, so automatically, it's a good photo, which just honestly isn't true. You still need to have good composition, good storytelling, good light. All those things are still really important. It's just that film will give it a different look. Now, I think the reason why everybody should shoot film is just mainly for what it teaches you, and I think the main lesson there is patience. Every photographer has fallen into the trap of shooting 1,000 shots of the same thing over and over again, praying that one of them is going to be good. And then also, we shoot a lot just because we can. We shoot everything, and instead of using that time on set or on location to look for a better way to shoot this, we just make it work because we can fix it in post. Whereas with film, the goal, at least for me, is to try to keep it as clean as possible and to try to get everything done right in camera on set or on location, just because I want a very clean negative with minimal editing, and I want to keep the natural look of my film. Shooting film requires a little bit more patience because you really do have to start thinking about, is my composition on point? Is my lighting good? Is this model or subject posed properly in frame? I think those are all things that we kind of overlook when we're shooting digital just because we can fix it later. Whereas with film, it's like, no, we have to get it right now. And so I think it's really important to start thinking about those things, because when you do start bringing that over into the way you shoot digital, then you become a lot more efficient. At least I found that once I started shooting a little bit more film, I became a lot more efficient on set and on location shooting digitally, because yes, even though I am taking, let's just say 500 pictures, whereas opposed to maybe 1,000 before, I'm also taking a lot more quality pictures and a lot more different angles and things to look at, whereas before I was shooting the same thing over and over and over again, praying that one of them came out properly. Another thing that piggybacks off of that is just the idea of shooting a finite amount of images. So when you shoot medium format, depending on the aspect ratio that you're shooting, of course you're going to get a different amount of shots per roll. For example, I shoot on a 6x6, so I get 12 shots out of every roll of 120 film that I use. And then of course when you shoot 35mm, for the most part it's either 36 or 24 exposures. And I think having a finite amount of shots really helps you tell your story a little bit better, because it does make you think, like, I can't just keep shooting or else I'm going to run out of film. And it's funny because when I first started shooting film, my logic was, well, I'll just keep buying more film. It's like, no, I think I was really missing the point. It was more about being more efficient and telling the story in less shots and making every single shot count. There are photographers out there who, when they get their negatives back, or their, I guess, positives if you want to be specific for E6, but when they get their negatives back, their entire roll looks good. Every single frame is a usable, postable, amazing image, and it's crazy because those are, I feel, in my opinion, some of the best photographers, just because they were patient enough to really wait and look and kind of form an image without having to take it multiple times. And I think that's important just because that's really efficient, and they really efficiently use that roll of film. They didn't waste a single shot, and that's something that I'm still working on too. And I think that's important just because I feel that when you're using film and you're required to be a little bit more efficient, it makes it a lot more challenging, but also a lot more rewarding, because now you didn't waste time, and you didn't waste shots, you didn't waste film, because film is not cheap. Another thing that I think is really important about shooting film is just the way that it looks. Now, of course, I know that you can recreate the way film looks generally in Lightroom or Photoshop. It's possible, and I've seen it happen, and there's some images that even fool me sometimes. I'm like, oh wow, was that shot on film? No, it was shot on digital, and it's like, oh wow, that fooled me, And then, of course, even now some of the new Fuji cameras have film stock simulations, and it's pretty cool because they do look rather much like their film stocks, and it's really interesting. I do feel that shooting film does give a quality to your images that it's a lot harder though to recreate digitally, just because the grain structure, the colors, those are things that are hard to really recreate. And there's something about the softness of it too, because it's all grain, just because it's so hard to recreate that sharp, that soft but not out of focus look is the best way I can explain it. And I know that like I said, there are a lot of ways to do that probably in Lightroom and Photoshop, but I do just think that it's very unique, especially when you shoot every different type of film. I do think it's important to see how every film stock affects your image, and it's also really important to see just how having those limited ISO ranges, for example, can really change the way you shoot. And so it's really going to ask you to think about your exposure and your exposure like compensation when you're on set, because one, you can't preview your image, so you're either using a light meter or you're kind of just doing the Sunny 16 rule, but pretty much you really have to start really thinking about how you're gonna expose this image. And I think that's really important, because if I'm shooting Portrait 400 and it's a rule of 36 exposures, and all of a sudden the sun's coming down, at some point I'm not gonna have a fast enough shutter speed to take good images. So what's the move? Am I going to be using a tripod? Am I going to stop all the way down to f1.4? What's the move there? And I think once again it just goes back into the idea of it really makes you think a lot more. And I think bottom line, that's what it comes down to, is that film really does challenge you, and it really does make you think a little bit more. It makes you really question if that shot is good. And I think that's really important, because it's like you should be thinking those things. Alright guys, that's it for today. Thank you for listening and watching. I appreciate it, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.